The radar contact appeared so suddenly that nobody in the aircraft spoke for the first few seconds. One moment, the crew was focused on the mission beneath them. The next, a fast-moving fighter had lifted off the coastline and was heading directly toward their patrol route. Inside the surveillance aircraft, screens glowed with fresh tracks and warning symbols. Nobody panicked. Nobody raised their voice. But every person on board understood the same thing at the exact same moment. If that fighter kept coming, the mission was about to become something very different. The aircraft maintained its course. That decision sounds simple now. At the time, it wasn't. The crew had spent hours searching a stretch of ocean that most people would never think about. The area looked empty from above. Endless water, empty sky. But intelligence reports suggested something important was moving below the surface, something that wasn't supposed to be found. The problem was that someone else seemed determined to make sure it stayed hidden. The fighter closed the distance quickly. Minutes later, it appeared beside the surveillance aircraft, matching its speed with an ease that almost looked effortless. The difference between the two machines couldn't have been more obvious. One was built to observe, the other was built to dominate airspace. Then came the first radio transmission. A calm voice instructed the crew to leave the area immediately. No threats, no shouting. Just a warning. The mission commander listened, acknowledged the transmission, and continued exactly where he was going. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then the fighter moved closer. Not dangerously close. Not yet. Just close enough to make a point. The message was obvious. We know you're here. We know what you're doing. And we're watching every move you make. Still, the aircraft stayed on course. Inside the cockpit, the pilots kept their eyes forward. Behind them, operators continued monitoring sensors. The mission hadn't changed, at least not officially. But something unusual was becoming impossible to ignore. The fighter wasn't acting like an aircraft simply escorting someone away from restricted airspace. It was following a sequence. Every movement felt deliberate. Every maneuver seemed rehearsed, as if both sides already knew exactly what came next. And that was the uncomfortable part. Because if this really was a sequence, then the most aggressive step probably hadn't happened yet. A second warning arrived. This one carried a different tone, less professional, less patient. The surveillance aircraft was again instructed to leave immediately. Again, the crew refused, and that's when the fighter broke away. For a brief moment, it disappeared from the aircraft's sensors. Then it came back, fast, much faster than before. The fighter surged upward and crossed closer than anyone on board expected. The turbulence slammed into the larger aircraft. Coffee cups rattled. Equipment shook. Several crew members instinctively grabbed nearby handholds. The fighter had just demonstrated something important. It wasn't trying to communicate anymore. It was applying pressure, and the pressure was increasing. What nobody outside the aircraft knew was that the crew still hadn't abandoned the real mission. Even while fighters circled around them, operators continued tracking something below the ocean's surface. That detail would become important later, because this wasn't actually about aircraft. Not yet. The fighter returned once again. This time it approached from a different angle. The pilot deliberately exposed the aircraft's weapons during the pass. Missiles, sensors, everything visible, nothing hidden. It wasn't an attack, but it was designed to feel uncomfortably close to one. The crew understood exactly what they were seeing. A demonstration. A reminder of who held the advantage. An unarmed surveillance aircraft facing an armed fighter has very few options. And the fighter pilot knew it. What he didn't know was that the surveillance crew had already made a decision. No matter how uncomfortable things became, they were staying. Because leaving now would mean abandoning hours of work, and potentially losing whatever was hidden beneath the water. But this only matters once you see what happened next, because the encounter was about to cross a line that changed everything. The fighter disengaged again. The crew watched it descend below them. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then the pilot realized something was wrong. The fighter wasn't moving away. It was accelerating, directly toward them. The closure rate climbed rapidly. Seconds later, the fighter executed a maneuver so aggressive that several crew members would later struggle to believe what they had witnessed. The jet swept around the larger aircraft at extremely close range, wrapping it inside violent wake turbulence. The effect was immediate. The surveillance aircraft rolled unexpectedly. Instruments shook. Loose items flew across compartments. For a brief moment, maintaining control became the only priority. The pilots disconnected automated systems and flew manually through the disturbance. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Everyone on board understood that the situation had just entered new territory. The fighter stabilized after completing the maneuver. Then came another warning. Leave immediately. The crew didn't leave. Instead, the mission commander transmitted a short encrypted message. Most people would have missed its significance. The message contained no dramatic speeches, no requests for rescue, just a concise report. 2 fighters. Unsafe actions. Mission continuing. Support requested. Then the crew waited. And far away, hundreds of miles from the confrontation, another chain of events quietly began moving into place. Controllers reviewed available aircraft, fuel states, locations, response times. The closest capable fighters weren't nearby. They were already committed to a completely different mission. Reaching the surveillance aircraft would require time. And time was exactly what the crew didn't have much of. For several long minutes, the situation remained frozen. The fighters maintained pressure. The surveillance aircraft continued searching. Nobody knew who would make the next move. But something else was happening. Something the fighter pilots hadn't noticed. Someone was already coming. The reinforcement aircraft accelerated hard across open sky. Pilots reviewed intercept procedures. Weapons systems came online. Radar systems expanded their search areas. Every mile reduced the response time. Every minute brought them closer. Meanwhile, the fighters near the surveillance aircraft remained focused on their original target. That confidence would soon become a problem, because they believed they controlled the encounter. They believed they were the strongest force in the area. And sometimes the most dangerous assumption a pilot can make is believing nobody else is watching. The first indication arrived without visual contact. A warning tone, a signal, an unmistakable notification that another radar had found them first. The fighter pilot immediately understood the implication. Someone had entered the game, and whoever it was possessed enough capability to lock onto him before he even knew they were there. The advantage vanished instantly. Everything changed. For the past several minutes, the fighters had controlled every aspect of the encounter. Now they were the ones being tracked. Now they were the ones being evaluated. Now they were the ones facing uncertainty. The psychological shift happened faster than any maneuver, because pilots understand something civilians often don't. The most dangerous missile is usually the one you never see. And the fighters suddenly realized they were looking in the wrong direction. The aircraft that arrived weren't there to negotiate. They weren't there to issue warnings. They didn't need to. Their presence alone changed the outcome. The fighters broke away. Rapidly. Aggressively. The same aircraft that had spent the morning forcing others to react were now reacting themselves. Within moments, they were heading home. No shots fired. No missiles launched. Just a complete reversal of momentum. The surveillance aircraft remained exactly where it had been all along. Still flying. Still searching. Still focused on the mission that started everything. And only then did the final piece of the puzzle emerge. The sensors detected what they had been looking for. The object hidden beneath the ocean. The reason the fighters had launched. The reason the warnings escalated. The reason somebody had been willing to risk an international incident in the first place. Suddenly, the entire confrontation looked different. The aircraft in the sky had never been the real target. They were only a distraction. The real story had been unfolding below the surface the entire time. And that leaves a far more interesting question. If someone was willing to push the limits of safety, diplomacy, and military escalation just to keep one thing hidden, how many other things remain hidden simply because nobody has looked in the right place yet?